Hello, welcome back to your next stop. This is Juliette Hahn. I say it every episode, and I'm going to say it again. I'm really excited about my guest, Jason Gordon. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. Super excited.
This is like, I mean, you guys always laugh at me because every time I have a guest on, I say that every time, but I'm really, truly excited to share your story. But I also love that we met in a basketball gym. And I just had a live show with someone that is they basically a social media expert, but they had a basketball background. And like literally when he said that, it was probably towards the end of the episode. I just felt even more connected. Everyone that listens knows that my middle son is loves basketball, and it's one of my absolute favorite sports. So I
And
am
he's a good
excited.
ball player too, so it doesn't hurt.
Right, right. Doesn't hurt. It definitely doesn't hurt. But so Jason, when we met, we were in Long Island. You guys had just driven. I mean, I felt like it was almost like an overnight. You were coming from Vermont, where you live, and I met your wife, and I sat down because it was like a new kind of camp that he was doing. It was a 1 day camp. It was actually, I have to say, there was a lot of older, very tall kids. And I remember just being like, I'm going to ask this mom if she's been here before. And that's kind of how we started talking. And then she introduced me to you. We started talking. And then I think I paused you and I was like, oh, I don't want to know anymore. I have to have you on my podcast.
Yeah, no, it was, when you meet people, certain energy and certain vibes, like it just automatically clicks. That's kind of how I felt, where I was like, oh, I got to go do this thing, but I'm going to be right back. And I didn't want the conversation to end.
No, I totally agree. So we're going to start a little bit, just if you can, I'm going to let people know where they can find you. So on Instagram, Coach Gordon, but it's Coach underscore Gordon 11. And then also, and you guys are going to be like, wait, I want to know more, but you're going to find out more. But just so you can kind of check out Jason's socials, Rise, and then the number two, the top underscore VT, and then the website Rise to, again, the number topvt.com. And I will have this all in the show notes. So if you guys are driving, please don't stop, or please don't, try to write this down. We will have you where you can find this. But so Jason, if you can just kind of give a little backgrounds where you grew up, because it's the other thing that we kind of connected on, where you grew up, and then, where you went to, if you went to university, and then kind of where you created what you're doing, but just a little in the beginning, and then we'll get into the meat of the story.
Yeah. So once again, Juliet, thanks for having me. And I mean, for me, it's always been like a pleasure of just sharing this story with people, just because of like where I'm coming from. It's not necessarily the best place, but it can happen for people. Born and raised in the Bronx, Bronx, New York kid, Jamaican parents. What really stems is like I'm like many other kids growing up in that type of environment, poor background. We, single mother working 3 jobs, trying to make ends meet, trying to raise a boy into a man in the middle of not so friendly circumstances. We've lived in public housing with, from cockroaches crawling up the wall. You turn the lights on and they scatter, to, being able to take different routes home just because of, the bad stuff that happened. Um, but that all intertwined, people would say, oh my goodness, that's terrible. And I tell people, like, it's terrible, but it's made me who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And it's allowed me to see things from a different like view. Uh, After growing up in New York City and the Bronx, my mom moved to Manhattan. And at that point in time, I really wanted to get out of the city. Wanted to go someplace where, you know, basically where they had a lot of trees versus billboards, right? So
Right.
um, I got the opportunity to get recruited and go to New York Military Academy, which is a military school like 45 minutes outside of the city. Um, and it was awesome. Like it was like I didn't know I was a leader until I got there. Uh, I was a little bit of a roughhouser as a before I got there, so listening and not following directions was right up my alley. But going there definitely showed me how I can take um, you know, my capabilities of, talking to people and people wanting to talk to me, to a whole different level of getting them to do something that they probably didn't want to do in the first place, right? Like, so at these military high schools, people think adults are the one running it. It's really not. It's the kids. So you're having to convince your peers into doing something like, hey, 5:30 wake up and iron your uniform and do all these things and go outside and stand for the raising of the flag. Not a lot of kids that were being sent there wanted to do that.
I'm going to
So
pause you for a second because
yeah.
I love that you said that's where you learned your leadership. And I would assume, just like in any kind of circumstances, some people rise to the top, some people follow, some people fail. What do you think gave you that rise to the top? Do you think it had to do with watching your mom, really push and work hard? Or do you think it was something that you were born with?
So for me, I don't think leadership is it like leaders aren't born. Like there's some like traits that you may have instinctively, but I think it's through hard work, dedication, resiliency, like all of these things that are molded, right? Like when people want to get better at a sport, it's the amount of reps that they get in, right? Like you
Hmm.
doing this podcast, how many reps have you gotten into? And we talked about this, right? But the more reps you get, the easier it becomes.
Right.
So I think that's the same thing with leadership, where if I get 1,000 or 100,000 reps trying to help lead people, then it's just going to seem like I'm a better leader, right? Like Colin Powell, one of my idols, um, uh, you know, I would read all of his books, and just because he had the same background. And it's not to say, like, when people say, oh, well, when you come from a certain area, people who look like me, I tell people this because like Colin Powell he was from the Bronx, South Bronx, Jamaican parents, went as high as he can go in the military, in the army, and then worked for the State Department and did all of these things and just had such an impact on people. And I think that's because of where he grew up, right? Like
Right.
he
Hmm.
never, and I got to meet him like at my college, nonetheless, at Norwich University. And the first story he told was about how he treated people, right? The people like in the State Department, you park your car underneath this tunnel, and they basically, most of them are immigrants that are parking your car. And
Hmm.
he always was fascinated with how they like they put certain people's car in certain areas closer than the other, right? So some people's cars are way in the back and some are right up front. And he was like, he was fascinated by like how they knew where to put people's cars. And he's like, and he asked one of the attendants, like, how do you choose who goes where? He's like, if people wind their window down and they smile and they're nice to us, we park their car close.
I
And it was
love that.
like, like just a simple action of kindness, like that's how some people do business, right? Like if
Hmm.
you're really kind and all you care about is helping others, sometimes that's the stemming. So I think for me, the whole rising to the top like syndrome is not like to the top of monetary means, is rising to the top of whatever you're great at, right? Like
Hmm.
if you're good, go be great, right? Like don't stop at just being good.
Right.
Like go big or go home. Like don't worry about what people think. Don't worry about who's doing what. Like you have one life, one skin, one everything, and go big. Like don't. And that's how I feel about rising to the top.
Right. No, I love that. And I think that was such a great analogy because people can really also think about it and see it in front of them. And I 100% agree with that. I think that everyone's circumstances can mold them, but it's also the people that take those circumstances and do something with them because not, a lot of people will get certain circumstances and you hear stories, people that came from nothing but just had that tenacity because they were put in the right place in the right time, but then also the ones that made their own path. And so that always kind of fascinates me, just how the human brain and what everyone's path is. People know on this podcast I talk about, I really truly believe we all have a path, and we talked about this
Mhm.
at the gym, whether you believe in God or the universe, and not all of us find it, But when we do find that path and the doors just start opening, it's really cool to see what happens. So I know that that's kind of where we started really also connecting, because it was my dad was in the military. He was in Vietnam, and then the basketball. And then you were saying things like you're saying. And I mean, we literally, and people I know right now are laughing because they're like, oh, I'm so excited. I was so excited. And it was so sweet because your wife and your daughter were sitting there, also listening with just, smiles on their face, because it is something to see when people are in their passion, when they're in the right spot, the
Mhm.
excitement and how they can inspire others. So then take us through. So then you were in this military academy, then you went to university, and give us a little bit more there.
Yeah, so I went to a military college. My mom really didn't want me to go to a larger university. And you know, kids who are are raised by their mothers, especially single black mothers, you don't say no to mom. Like it was one of those things. And really, to tell you the truth, I think she knew ahead of time, right? Like I wanted to go to UMass Amherst, play basketball, or Citadel, like all these big cities. And she's like, no, you're not going to graduate from there because you're too much of a people person. You're too much of a partier, right? We've got
Yep.
to we got to find a space that is boring, right? Like there's so I don't want to say it's boring, but I mean
No,
anyone who knows of Norwich University in the middle of Northfield, Vermont, it's surrounded by we're in the middle of this valley, and when I say I've never felt cold the way I felt cold there, I mean the wind would just rip through there in these wool military uniforms, and it's the oldest military college in the nation. So I most people say, how did you even end up in Vermont? Like,
right,
why Vermont of all places? And I always attribute that to my mom, right? Like, we went down into the town, and there was maybe one pizza restaurant at the time,
right,
right? And a gas station. That was literally it. That was the whatever, a mile and a half down the road from the university, nothing to do. Like you literally I was looking around and people were waving at us. And being from New York City, you're like they're driving and waving and you're like what's going on here? So
right,
yeah, I mean, it for me, that was the best place that I could have ended up because of like everything that I was learning in high school. It just doubled down in college, where now, all of us are like trying to become professionals in our own. I call it the little Pentagon, right? So you have every single branch of service that's attending this academy, right? So, and then on top of it, the NSA and all of these other kids are on scholarship for like cyber and all these things. So, and then you have civilians, which is where I met my wife, right? And they're just civilians. So they're just like doing whatever it is that they're doing. So I call it literally the mini Pentagon of Vermont in a
right.
sense, in the middle of nowhere.
I love it. So I do have to ask, so why the military? I know, and also like the military high school, was it to get out of the city and then it just led to other things and you found, a path for yourself, or was there something more behind that?
Yeah, no, it really was to just get out of the city. I
Hmm.
just felt that there was a lot of things that were negative, right? Like taking the subway and 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 just trying to get away from the environment that I was in, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I noticed, you know, I had friends who are super smart, right? And they made the wrong choice, right? 30
Hmm.
seconds of a wrong choice, going the wrong place at the wrong time, and and they ended up serving 25 to life in
Right,
prison. And that like ultimately like scared me,
right,
where it was like, wow, like you're trying to make quick cash or quick money. And I think it was the fear plus the opportunity. Plus we lived in this like one bedroom apartment, right? Like, so it's not like I ever had my own room.
right,
So it drove, like boarding school was calling my name. It's like, oh, all right, I get to have some space, right? Like I get my own room. It's like college. So I think that ultimately drew me even more. And I wanted my mom's stress level to go down, right? Like, so every time I left the house, she would, like
Right.
any other mother when their child leaves the house, but a little bit more when you're in that like environment.
Right.
So
Understandable. I mean, because I know you have a teenager as well, and it is, there is, different levels of the stress, but just the top line stress of your child going out, not knowing where they are, not knowing what they're doing. You know who they're hanging out with, but are they making the right choices? And then you just have on top of it that you're in the city and maybe not the best areas. Yeah, I can't imagine. So that makes 100% complete sense. So then you found some passion in that, and that's where led you. And I love that you said that Norwich. Because we talked about, I played two sports in college as well, and going to the big school is really what I was thinking I wanted. And I remembered my mom just being like, let's just get you through this.
let's just let. And my mom, she was like, love her to death, but she didn't really like me playing sports. Like my mom actually, she's only seen me play once in her entire
Wow.
life. So, and I mean, I thought I was pretty good at
Right.
sports at the time. But she was all about education, right?
Right.
Like it was education's what's going to get you out of here, talking about generational wealth, like things that are now popular to talk about. Um, she wanted nothing to do with sports. Like
Right.
it was, and it's crazy now because all she does is watch sports. And I'm like, Mom, like you never came to my games. And she was just like, well, these recruiters kept I mean, she hung up the phone on recruiters. I mean,
Right.
it was if they called on a Sunday, like she was just like, why are you calling my house? Like it
Right.
was, yeah. So no, but ultimately everything happens for a reason,
Right.
right? Like, and I wouldn't change that for the world because she knew early on. And I think for me, it helped me get to where I am today as well. So
Right. No, I think it's great. I love that. And I love, um, a mother's love is a big thing. And your mom sacrificed a lot for you. And so she expected, I'm sure, something not in return, but like, this is what I want for you, And so I love that. So you went to Norwich, and then what happened from there?
yeah, so while I was at Norwich, I basically, it was an expensive private school, right? So it wasn't one of those. It wasn't one of the cheaper schools. It's probably one of the more expensive schools on the East Coast that we paid someone to yell at us,
Right.
and that's what everyone kind of imitates it as. But it was great school as far as leadership is concerned, and building great people. I basically joined the Army National Guard here while I was here because then it would give me, a stipend, money while I was in school. Once again, taking the pressure off of my mom, trying to figure out like, oh, okay, well, you need these, items and books and so forth. And from there, I enlisted, and in my senior year, I got basically deployed. Got deployed overseas. That was not a fun conversation to have with my mother
Oh,
because
I'm sure.
she was not happy with me. She wanted me to finish college first before joining, and I decided otherwise. And I was like, "Oh, nothing will happen, Mom. I'm good." And we got deployed to Kuwait and Iraq, and it was at that moment I had turned 21 in the summer, and being 21 years of age and being sent to this foreign land in the middle of the desert where things are just different. Um, yeah, it really helped me grow
Right.
substantially. Like it, yeah.
And now and you had already met Courtney. So were you guys
Yeah. So Courtney, we were planning on, well, I was planning on proposing probably middle of my senior year, and got the random phone call that you've been involuntarily mobilized. And it went from middle of the year to a shotgun 2 weeks later, getting married in the basement of Reverend Wicks. And then we had an official wedding, but for paperwork purposes. And it was funny because we we've been trying to figure out like when our anniversary really is, right? Because we got married beforehand, and then had a wedding ceremony for the family prior to. But yeah, the first year of marriage was spent while I was in Iraq and she was here. So that was, and being 21, 22 years of age, right around.
Right.
Um, yeah, and she's been with me ever since. I don't know how, but
Well, I mean, the little that I got to know her, she is definitely a special soul. You can just feel that. So, I mean, right. So you're young, you're newly married, and you're in a foreign country. I mean, that's a lot
mhm.
to absorb as a young, especially a young mind. Don't they say a male brain doesn't fully develop until
Till they're 20, yeah, 25 or something like that.
right? So, I mean, that had to been, you know, culture shock. I mean, that really just had to been some stuff that I mean,
Yeah,
take us a little through that.
I mean, for me, I think the biggest part of it was we thought we had problems,
Right.
right? Like when you go to a foreign country and you see how people are living in these huts that you can literally put a fist through, um, no running water, you start to really look at life completely differently, right? Like you want to maximize the time that you have, like, and nothing's promised. And I think for me, that's what really being in a war torn environment and being around my brothers at that time, because it's not like I was doing like an admin job. I was an infantry guy.
Right.
So at, at the end of the day, 140-degree weather, I get a phone call or get to make a phone call to my wife, and you don't want to talk about the things that you had to go through, right? And
Right.
especially if and when you lose someone, right?
Hmm.
And I think that was the biggest like I think the biggest culture shock of it all was when we lost someone. Like when we someone that we knew, and I went to college with them. So knowing someone and then pretty much knowing that they're no longer there or coming back, you're just like, wow, if they got to that individual, like what about me? Right?
Right.
Like what how am I gonna get through all of this?
And
Like,
right. And also, I mean, I have to say, I've lost some very close people to me, but I was able to be in a safe environment, be able to mourn them, be able to then celebrate them in most circumstances. When you're in the situation you were in, I'm just kind of speculating. It's not like that you can have that grieving time. You kind of have to put your hat back on and be like, okay, we need to, do we have a job here? I have to focus on that. So was that something that you kind of had to put and especially now, I mean, again, you're a young kid. Okay, I'm mourning the death of this is, really messed up, but I have to now put my other brain on to continue and do my job.
I mean, for me, environmentally, the loss was a big deal, but I think ultimately my environment that I grew up in the Bronx, it prepared me, right? Like, I hate saying it, but
Right.
where where I grew up, like good things didn't always happen. Like you went to school one day and then a classmate didn't show up, and then you're doing a candlelight visual for whatever reason,
Right.
and and it's I don't want to say you become numb to it, but
Right.
you learn. I don't know how to put it. Like it became like boys don't cry,
Hmm.
right? Like don't shed a tear. Like you need to be tough. All the things that now being older, you're just like, man. Sometimes you gotta let it out, right?
Right.
Like don't hold it in. Like don't try to be this this tougher version of yourself. But at the time, while all this is going on, you're correct. Like you had to put it someplace else,
Right.
right? Like I would say I became angry, like more and more, like a short fuse,
Right.
especially coming home. Like I had so much of a short fuse. Like I didn't want to deal with people. didn't want to go to malls, didn't want to go to like crowded areas, um, just didn't want to be around people. And I would say, for a lot of veterans, um, that's that dark place, right? Like the dark place that people, and being young, right?
Right.
Now I'm back home after a deployment, expecting our first child, right? Trying to finish up college so that my mom doesn't kill me
Right.
because, right?
Because
So
you
I'm,
promised her. Right.
yeah, I promised her, and working 2, 3 different jobs, whether it's at a pizza joint, at a restaurant, just trying to make ends meet and trying to figure out what's next. So yeah, I don't want to, you know, minimize the time overseas, but it was something that taught me how to just cherish the moment and cherish your life. Like
Right.
ultimately, like we have no clue on when the end is coming, right?
Right. Right.
So tomorrow is never promised, and that's the way I live life, like currently. Like that's the way I've built a business. Like that's I don't worry about what everybody else is doing. I actually could care less
Right.
about other people's opinion. And I'm serious. Like
No, I'm the same
there's
way.
only
Yeah.
like a core group of people that really can influence me from not doing something.
Hmm.
And if that core is all on board and they're about it, I'm I'm going full throttle.
Right.
Like, and I become obsessive about it.
Right.
So
No, I love that. I love that. So, were you ever deployed again, or was that because I know when we spoke, I feel like that you were still, you had just kind of exited the military. I don't think that's the correct term, but
yeah, so I had left for it was like you can take like a leave of absence. So I went to the police academy down in Austin, Texas, of course, right?
right.
Like graduating college and then took the highest paying job. It was between like Secret Service, APD, NYPD. Like I was just trying to figure out. I was like, all right, we're going to Texas, and we packed up. Literally had maybe $200 to our name, rented some like Penske truck, and
Right.
like tried to drive through to Texas for like 2 days. Got there in 2 days because we didn't have enough money for the hotel to stay in a hotel, and it was just. I mean, of course, Alex at that time was probably 2 years old.
Hmm.
All right, like we barely had furniture. Like we had a blow up mattress in the living room.
Right.
And that's what we sat on, right? Like it was, man, I'm thinking about that right now and I'm like, wow, it was like we, we just decided to, just continue to grind and continue to figure things out as a young couple married, um,
With the new
and
baby.
nothing, yeah, with a new baby. Right. And so, you know, I was going through the academy. If most people don't know, the academy at Austin is like 8 or 9 months long. It's one of the longer police academies.
Hmm.
Um, and but they paid more. So I was driven by money, right?
Right.
And I think Austin really showed me like don't go after something with a monetary gain, right? Like when people are deciding on a job, the last thing you should decide on is the money part of it because oh things we had never lived south, right? So we were from either New England or New York City or, the Northeast.
Hmm.
So going to Texas, I would say was a huge wake up call, right? There are things that I had been called that I had never been called before.
Wow.
And I was just like, wow, oh, okay.
Right.
This is another part of the world. And I'm not saying that all, like, I'm not
Right.
generalizing it, but in my experience being there, my wife, she experienced some things. They were asking, oh, what adoption agency did you get your child from? Like it was some crazy just conversations with people
Right.
that I'm just like, okay, like,
And
um,
this is what, so probably the
oh,
12,
2000,
like, so 12 years ago, right? Like,
oh, more than that,
okay.
easily. Yeah, 2007, 2008
Okay.
ish time frame.
Yeah.
So yeah, Austin hadn't really gotten their boom
Right.
yet. They were getting there. right?
Right.
Like, and it was like, keep Austin weird. It reminded me so much of like Burlington
Hmm.
in a sense. So, um, but yeah, I my wife did not enjoy Texas, to say the least. Um, and then we had family uh, medical issues up here in the Northeast. So trying to get away with the hectic schedule, she's flying back and forth to help family and do certain things. We decided that it was best for us to move back north to the Northeast, and we decided to move in Vermont again.
So
Well,
you miss the cold.
I did not miss the cold. I'm looking at the snow this morning in Michigan, and I'm like, oh, we're about 3 days away.
Oh,
So
right.
yeah, we'll have that here pretty soon. So yeah, no, we moved to Vermont because it was in the middle of both grandparents, right? Maine and then New York City.
Right.
So it was in between. Um, and yeah, I came back and joined back up into the military after that law enforcement experience. But that law enforcement experience really taught me that there are so many kids that need our help,
Hmm.
just guidance. And by them, I was one of two other individuals in my academy class that happened to be African American, right?
Oh,
So
right.
out of a class of 100 individuals, there were only two of us
Right. Wow.
in the middle of in the middle of Texas, and I was just like, wow. But like 80 or 90% of us were all military, prior
Oh,
military. So that was like, it was like never seen before. They were like,
right.
man, like 90% of you guys are all military, and all of us were just coming back from war for like, so
That's
talk
so
about
interesting.
dynamics. Oh, talk about the dynamic shift and us trying to figure out who we are afterwards was definitely a challenge.
Now, are you still connected with any of those guys in that group?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And it's pretty funny because now they're like detectives and counter drug guys, and we were all just so green behind
Hmm.
the ears, right? Like we were in our 20s. Like
Right.
we didn't know anything, and we're going out trying to police. And yeah, it definitely, I would say, was an eye-opening experience because I I look at the Bronx where I grew up and I go, man, that was rough. But in every state there's a Bronx,
Right.
right? Like there are kids right now that have all the potential to be great, but they just don't have the means, or they
Hmm.
may not have the mentorship or the guidance, or someone telling them, hey, not just telling you, hey, don't do that because of this. You could actually be a Fortune 500 company runner someday, right?
Hmm.
Like yes, you can also be a street pharmacist, right? And you can probably be good at it, but you can also run this company. And I think, yeah, that's one of the biggest things that I noticed growing up was we had some kids that were so gifted, whether it be athletically or academically, but being smart wasn't cool back then.
Right.
Like it wasn't, right. That
Right.
didn't
It,
get you any
no,
of the ladies or any of the gear or whatever it is. And yeah, and people made decisions, lifelong decisions, based upon how cool they can become.
right. Which is, I mean, and you still see it in some sense. I know even with my kids, they'll be like, say things, and I'm like, wait, what? Like that doesn't make any sense. Like it doesn't really matter. Like high school is such a blip in our life if we really think about it, but it is such a shaping time. It's so
It
crazy to
is.
think that it's such a short time, middle school and high school, but it does, it really does formulate sometimes who you are, and then the things that you hold on to. So many people that I've interviewed, whether they've had good experiences in high school or bad experiences, or even when I lived in New York City, I remember I had I was going to basically apply for an apartment. It was an apartment down in the West Village, and there was 3 roommates and they were looking for a fourth. And I remember going and the guys being excited that I was going to be a roommate. And the one girl was like, "Oh, you were that girl." And I was like, "What girl? What girl was I?" She's like, "You played sports." And I was like, "I did play sports." She's like, "Yeah, your type was really mean to me." And I was like, "This is so weird." I was like, "Okay, I was never mean." She's like, "Well, I was in drama." And I was like, "Okay." I grew up in a town that we weren't. I had friends that were in drama. Like and it was a very nice town in New Jersey. And I didn't have the same drama. I think other classes did, or I just didn't involve myself in drama. I still am the same way as an adult woman. If there's drama and I'm like, I don't have time for drama. I just do my own thing. Like if you guys want to be dramatic, that's fine. But I remember like her being like, she was like really upset. And I was like, "Okay, well I didn't grow up with you. And I'm so sorry. I will change your mind, but it's such a short period of time. And the fact that she went back to that moment and I made her uncomfortable because I played sports and it brought her back to a bad time in her life. And she was a super successful woman. Like that was the other thing. I was like so taken back. And she was probably 6 years older than me too. So it was also like, this is so weird. Like I had just graduated college. So it is such a short time, but it does create.
Yeah, that's you're so yesterday I had a high school group. We're doing like preseason workouts, and everything that I do is co-ed,
Mhm.
right? I don't separate the boys and the girls, and there's a reason for that. Because I think girls, like right now, I think they can, like, if ever a time in history, females are coming. Like
Yeah.
they are coming like stronger than ever, and they've got a follow. They've got a huge following with them, and I love it. I
Yeah.
love it, especially having a daughter that's really like, she's like, I'm gonna run through you. Like
She's
I'm gonna,
dynamic. Yeah.
like, it's so awesome to see because I feel like it's time for women, right? It's, no longer the time of, trying to find women's sneakers in a sneaker store,
Right.
or wearing, like, it's coming, and like equal pay and whatever it may be, right? I feel that, and my point is that yesterday I gave like a brief overview of what you just said. I said high school is like maybe 2 to 3% of your life right now.
Right.
And I told him that. I'm like, you're not even going to be able to name one person from your class in 4 years.
Right.
You're going to have to go on Facebook to see what that person's name was again. The person that you care so much about their opinion of you right now.
Right.
Right. So, and I told them, I said, I feel like I got to tell you guys this because, like, the minute you stop caring what people think, life becomes so much sweeter. Like, you can still do all the great things and be kind to people, but don't put so much like emphasis on how people view you.
Right.
Because if you're trying to please people, I'm sorry to say, but you're not going to please everyone.
Right. Right.
And
And not everyone's going to
and
like you. And it's actually their problem. I think it's Brene Brown. She has a quote and I'm going to mess it up, but it's basically like what other people's opinion is none of your business. What
it's
other
none of
people
our
think.
business.
Yeah. What other people think of you is none of your business, I think is what it
I
is.
and I actually used that quote as well. I said it's none of our business what people think, and quite frankly, I don't care.
Right.
Like, just, I mean, if you do things based upon what people think of you, you're going to have a very boring and very pressure filled life. Let's
Mm-hmm.
just say that, in a sense,
Yeah.
where, so
No, I totally agree. So, okay. So I want to bring it back. You went back into the
mhm.
military and then you had how many more years? Cause then I want to get to the gym that you opened up and
Oh,
all the things that
geez.
you're doing now.
So I literally spent the next 15 years in the military, between the Army National Guard and then transferring over to the Air National Guard. And I became like a guy who became a subject matter expert for the military in terms of recruiting. Um, like for the Army Guard, I had helped create so many different recruiting systems when they changed their whole logo, went down to DC and helped, you know, do certain things with marketing. And I had no clue that that marketing campaign would have been probably one of the best marketing campaigns that the Army National Guard had ever had. Um, but it wasn't like me, I. It was like a bunch of us that formed this synergy team. And it was literally entrepreneurs sitting at the table
Right.
now that I think about it, right? Because like I go back to that same synergy team, and probably 20 of us are leading and created our own companies
I love it.
and like killing it. Like, and it's like, well, the military didn't. The military is not always friendly about like stepping outside of the box.
Right. Right.
Uh, I think they're learning now that there's other ways to solve a problem
Right.
that doesn't consist of, well, we've never done it that way. Um, and that's just another form of like being a leader, an innovative leader, that you can kind of say, okay, now I got to convince my boss to basically think that it's his idea or her idea
Right.
in order to get this to go through, right? So it was a lot of manipulating and maneuvering in the marketing world, right? And then marketing something that is intangible, right? Because the military is intangible. I can't say, oh, well, here, hold on to this career, or here, hold on to this. It's all based upon the individual, and everyone's experience is different. It's like high school, like you were saying,
Right.
right? So someone's experience in high school might have been great, but the next person might have been terrible. Like they, you know, so it was like, okay, now we've got to deal with everyone's experience. And I think what we tried to do and emphasize in the marketing deal was, let's not even worry about that. Let's just talk about the careers and how cool they basically look and what you can do after the military, right? Don't talk about the military, talk about what it can do for you afterwards, because that's what everybody was into at the time,
Right.
right? High school kids, they were like, oh, so if I get trained as a plumber or HVAC or whatever, after I have my license, I can go make $40, $50 an hour being a plumber or an HVAC. Yeah, you absolutely can. Right?
Mhm.
You can make more than some college kids getting out of college. So I think for us, that was more of the, I don't want to say marketing scheme, but it was the marketing analysis. And while I was there, like in the military, I felt like I was still being held back in a sense, right? Like you're in a corporation or a company and you're like, man, I could totally run this totally differently and be good at it. And I think that's where it stemmed, where I was like, all right, well, I'm helping these kids and I'm bringing you back tenfold, where it was like 5 years prior to me retiring, my son got really into sports and I was the parent who basically coached everything.
Right.
Right? Like if I didn't know how to play it, I was YouTubing, doing whatever practice plans, but I took it serious. And then it became like every parent who like had a kid in the sport was like, "Hey, coach, what sport you coaching next season?"
Right.
And it was like, I don't know. Well, whatever it is, I'm requesting you on the form for the recreational form, right? You can request a coach.
Right.
And it grew into this like enormous thing where we had like a basketball thing and I had created something in the town that we lived in and we got our butts kicked. When I say we got our butts kicked, I mean the scores that we were getting beat by was so terrible. Like it was, 60 something to 2. And we were clapping just because we scored one, right? And the parents were like, you're so positive with these kids and you're getting your butts kicked. And it was just like, yeah, but this is a lesson that they'll never forget. I guarantee you that. And it was funny because I was like, oh, like there's so many kids that need this mentorship and guidance. Like they didn't know how to control their anger when things didn't go their way. And it was just like, okay, I think I can kind of build something out of it. But after getting our butts kicked, what had happened was we just basically created like this group, a following of kids, and we in turn went like all summer just practicing and getting better. And I can tell you this: when they came back for the 5th and 6th grade league, same kids year after, thinking that, oh yeah, we beat you guys. Uh, we lost one game because my car broke down in Mass coming back from Massachusetts after Thanksgiving, and we lost by 1 point. But
Oh,
other than that, we hadn't lost one game, and it was funny because everyone knew all of these kids, and they saw how good they became in just 3 months.
and now was this your son's age group? So these were like the,
Yes.
yeah. So that,
Well, no, he was actually in fourth grade.
okay. But this was
So
basketball though. This is, yeah.
yes.
So this was basketball. So it was like you were taking it, which I love. I love that you saw that, I wanted to do something. I wanted to spend time with my son and be there. And then
Mhm.
you create like saw, okay, well, there's a need for this. And that's what I think there's so much with entrepreneurs that I think is really cool that happens that sometimes we don't realize is that we're filling a need that we don't realize until we've done it because it's something that like it's our path, right? We've learned all the things that we've learned throughout history, throughout our jobs, throughout our careers, throughout our life, and then it's all of a sudden it comes together like this enormous explosion, and it's so exciting to watch it evolve. And I feel like that's like what happened to you and yeah, and
Oh,
the gym and everything. And so the parents see that you're okay, doing this. Now, was this when were you still in the military at this point as
I was still in the military. I was still doing my regular day to day job, but at the same time, we had just created this LLC. And actually, it goes back to my mom. She's like, "Oh, I need to get you a Christmas gift," and I was like, "Well, to tell you the truth, Mom, I want to create an LLC for whatever." And she's like, "Well, how much does it cost?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm going to go to I forgot what the name of the website was, but it was formed by I think it was LegalZoom, formed by like Johnny Cochran or something, where
okay,
they do everything for you, right? Like
right,
they give you the pamphlet, they give you the stamp, and I was like, I just want to create something. And at that moment in 2013, I didn't know that it was going to turn into what it is today,
right,
but I knew that okay, let's put some thought to this. Let's see what can happen. And while I was in the military, even up until, like so 2013 is when we officially, but we didn't do anything with it for 2 years. All I did was buy like basketballs. And my wife was like, the garage is getting full of all this crap. Like, I need my parking space back. Right. Like, I bought a shooting machine for thousands of dollars. And she's like, how are you, what are we going to, like, it was complete madness on the things that I did. But I felt like at the time, I was like, we're using these things for the kids. But when I'm able to find a gym and utilize it,
you'll have all the
we're
stuff,
gonna
yeah.
we're gonna be ready, right? Like
Hmm.
I was buying all the stuff the NBA players were using in their videos, right? But
Right.
I bought a Vertimax, and all these kids are like, "What's Vertimax?" Like, "Oh, it'll help you increase your jumping ability and whatever." And I was like, if a professional athlete was using it, I bought it.
Right.
And I was just like, "Yep, they're gonna have the best of the best." Whether it's and that's really what I basically pride myself in. To like, I didn't want to get mediocre, mediocrity. I didn't want that for them. Right?
Right.
We're in the middle of Vermont. Yeah, okay, cool. Like, it doesn't matter where you're from. Like, I don't care. The hoop is still 10 feet. The basketball is still the same size. Right? Like, no one cares where you're from.
Right. And that's the thing when you're athletic, I feel like because it is, we both have the athletic background and it is and I know your mom didn't didn't push you for it, but you obviously had the athletic
Yeah, I
background.
still played dual sports in college.
Right.
Like, it was still.
Right. So you still played and you had the love for the game and it was what you were good at. And I do think when you are athletic, there's a lot of sports that you can pick up if you have the opportunity to. And there's certain areas that don't have the opportunity. I think we talked about my husband grew up in the Bronx and he played baseball and he played soccer. He was a short German Irish kid. He did not play basketball. He could play, but it just, he was outplayed most of the time. But those are the two sports that he played because that was where, what he did. Now, where I grew up, we had every sport. I mean, every sport I played. I mean, I played 4 sports. I think there was a time where I was actually like swimming. We thought that's what I was going to take off in. And then there was a certain time where it was like, no, I'm going to play field hockey and lacrosse. And that's really ultimately what I did. But I ran track. I did literally, volleyball. I did everything. And that's what I wanted for my kids as well. I wanted them to be able to have the ability because I saw that they had the athletic ability. And really, it was whatever we were going to put the time into, but whatever they also fell in love with. So my kids have played so many different things. My middle son, that is the basketball player, he's probably equally gifted in soccer, but he doesn't have the love for it the same way he has for basketball.
Well, it's so funny you mentioned that because I just did my own little podcast on the way to the gym, and it was talking about youth sports,
Mm-hmm.
and literally I played every single sport that you can think of.
Yes.
Especially when you go to a boarding school, we didn't have that many people
Right.
at the boarding school, so we would go from playing a baseball game, running down to go play lacrosse, the coach just throwing us a stick and go like, hey, like, go hit something.
Right.
Right? And I had never played lacrosse before.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, what do you want me to do? Like, and he's like, you'll figure it out.
Right.
Right? And he was right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you'll figure it out. And it was funny. It's funny that you say that. Like I was a junior Olympic fencer.
I love that. Oh my God.
Think about it. Like my mom I couldn't go to basketball until I went to fencing at the YMCA. And I got coached by this German Olympic coach that literally would hit my arm. Yeah. I mean,
that's
knew.
That's
he was
a whole
just like,
other podcast.
You're going to be a good fencer. And I was like, I'm only doing this because my mom is making me. And plus it looks good on college.
Right. Well,
like, and that was, at that moment, it was like you did everything. Like even if you didn't know how to do it, you still went outside and threw the football around.
Right. Right.
Or you were in the middle of the street playing stickball.
Yep.
It didn't matter what the sport was. It was, if it was tag, like it was competitive. And I think that's the one thing I miss about our generation, where kids are specializing in things way too soon. And yes, of course, I own a gym with predominantly basketball. So I can speak to it, where I see so many more injuries.
Right.
As far as that's concerned, but I digress. But
no,
that was,
but it is true, because that's one thing I would say. Parents would say to me all the time, "How are you doing this all with all 3 kids?" And I said, I want them, when they get to be a certain age, to decide, okay, this is the sport that I really love. And that was probably, my oldest, who is a soccer player. He really probably kind of made that decision his freshman year. Like, I'm going to give everything else up. I'm going to play, school soccer, but also play on my academy team. And, actually he still did track in school. So he was able to do a couple different things, but he was really focused on soccer. And that's what we did. My middle guy, I mean, he did 2, he was an AAU and also on an academy soccer team. Now, I have to tell you, the soccer coach made it really hard for us. The basketball coach understood and was like, I actually like that he plays soccer. It's giving him a leg up in certain things. The soccer coach, it was one of the reasons.
Oh no, you must. Yeah.
One of the reasons
you must do this. You shall do this. Like, yeah, I tell all the kids in my program, and parents know this about me. I'm a big believer in multi-sport athletes. And not only that, the injuries is really, because now you give your body a break.
Right.
Right. Like you're not using, because once these kids get to a certain age, like they get to college or they even get to play professionally, how many miles is on your body doing that same movement?
Right.
And then you're like, oh, how did I get there? Like, how did I get hurt? Well, here's where you got hurt. So kids who are playing AAU and playing basketball all year round, right, when they rupture their Achilles or when they tear their ACLs or when they do certain things, you're like, okay, well, I could have seen that coming.
Right.
Like your body is only
right. It only
got
could do
so
certain
many miles. It can only do it so long before it breaks down. So yeah, no, it's one of the things. And like I say to people, yeah, of course, it's in my best interest to tell you to come and play basketball because I own a gym that does basketball. But really, it's also my civic duty to tell kids, like, hey, go do something else.
Right.
Like, and it's also headspace, right? Like you now, like, it's a different headspace. If I was playing lacrosse, like I wasn't trying to go and play like professional lacrosse.
Right. It was
So
for
for
fun.
me, it was like, whoa, I get to hit people with a stick? Oh, let's go.
And it,
Like it
but
was,
it's an outlet, and that is so, it's so true. You can have the sport that you know, if you have the dreams and aspirations to go to college or go to the next level, you can do that. But if you have the other things where it's just fun, and that's why I always encourage my kids to do like all four of the school sports, you know, even if you might not be the best, because that is, you know, sometimes they're like, oh, I don't, I like to start and I like, you know, but as they've grown older, they see, okay, well, I can still be good at this, still have the less headspace, you know, I mean, get the headspace where it's like just getting stuff out, but then when I really need to focus, I can do that. So I love that, and I love that that's philosophy that you have as well. When did you start? So when did you find the space for the gym?
so I didn't really find a space to the gym until COVID. So I had been using our kids' school. They went to Christ the King Catholic school, and at the Catholic school level, they really didn't have like sports
Mm-hmm.
there. When I mean, they had it, but it wasn't like what I was expecting. You know, for a middle and elementary school to have. So I literally created our entire program based upon what the school's needs were.
Right.
And they were like, well, yeah, you can pay us to use the gym and do all these things. But I started inviting like NBA players that played. I started inviting NBA coaches to come to Vermont. And then all of a sudden they were like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, this is great for advertising. Like so they gained, so it was like we were both helping one another
Right.
in a sense where I was trying to just get kids excited about playing the game. And in turn, it helped them get more kids into the school because they had this program
Right.
that was being run in the school to the point where now my logo is still on the floor of the school. Like, I mean, the kids, they come to our new gym now that's, 10 minutes away from the school. But anytime the school says, hey, I need something from you, I stop what I'm doing and I'm like, hey, where do you need me? But during COVID, everything shut down.
Right.
Um, and basketball coaching, mentoring, it's a part of me. Like I can't not help people. Like I am a type of person that I get more out of helping people than if you paid me to do something that I wasn't really interested in doing.
Right.
And you could pay me tons of money to do this thing over here, but if I'm not helping anyone, it really like it's not satisfying.
Right.
And I think for me, I realized that as I was leaving the military, like my job or the job, whatever I do, has to be at a point where can I help someone? Can I help people? Right? Can I help the next legacy? Like building that legacy and next group of not only athletes but just monsters. Right? Like, and I don't mean monster in a bad
No,
way.
like great.
I'm
Yeah.
talking monster like you're not gonna like if I want to get something done, like you're gonna do it. Like your word is your bond. And I told kids like while I was at this Catholic school, I said in about a year or two, I'm going to have my own gym. And I purposely made like I guess it's an affirmation to like want to do this. But COVID pushed my hand a little bit earlier, and the minute COVID happened, I was I was stuck. And not only did I feel stuck, but all the kids that were in our program at that time, we probably had like 1,200 kids.
Right.
And all of a sudden we go from having kids in the gym doing junior MBA and doing our tournaments and training to like nothing,
Oh, I know it was tough.
to the point where parents are like, oh, I got to get these kids out of the house, like we got to do something. And I felt the same way. I was like, I'm not doing anything. Like I'm not coaching anyone. I'm sitting on the couch watching Netflix all the time. Like we gotta do something. And I started looking and searching for warehouse space. And at that time, it was a great time to look for warehouse space because COVID had stopped everything.
Right.
So the cost for warehouse space was way lower than what it normally would be uh, previously,
Right.
right? Like when everything is booming. And now it's back to normal. But I jumped in to get this space,
Smart.
and then I had these shooting machines that no contact,
Oh,
right?
right.
Like, so you come in, you take your temperature, You go to your shooting machine, we wipe the balls down, and then you get to work. And I don't have to I don't have to touch you. Right? We're wearing our masks, doing everything that we were. So we were the only gym that was open in the state of Vermont at that time.
Wow.
To the point where like people were like, "Dude, how are you still open?" So, but I was still working for the military,
Right.
and I was working with the emergency management team. So we were dealing with this COVID crisis over here, and I'm an entrepreneur. The minute I get out of work, I'm like rushing because I rented the gym 5 minutes from the base,
Smart.
so
Right.
so that I didn't have to like go very far. And yeah, like I was like, all right, guys, I gotta go. Like I gotta go open the doors. And if I couldn't open the doors, then my wife would, and so forth. And during COVID, I would say COVID, so many parents like emailed us and texted us and said, thank you so much. Like, we don't know what, like,
Right.
we would have done without you because, like, to tell you the truth, there were kids that were, they'd come into the gym and regardless of everything else that's going on in their life, they were just like, Coach, all I wanted to do was shoot some hoops today. I was looking forward to this all day
Well,
because I was on a Zoom class all day
right.
on my computer. And they would walk in the gym and they'd be like, thank you. Like, I'm
Uh,
like, I'll be back tomorrow, Coach. Make sure
right.
I get a slot. And I was literally in the gym until 9, 10 o'clock at night just because of so many kids who wanted to get into the gym.
Well, and I'm just thinking, I like actually got choked up because I mean, my kids, they were okay. I mean, it was, they missed their sport, but they were okay. They could play, my boys, especially out on the draw, like they could do things together. Um, but I know so many kids that like mental health just really, wreaked havoc on their family. And the fact that you were able to give them a space, a safe space that their parents were like, this is good. Like, and I'm sure, but I like the deep help. Like, I mean, I'm like a little lost for words, which just never happens. I mean, I can't imagine that your community and how thankful everyone was because you probably skirted, and I don't like that word either, but really helped some kids that could have went down dark holes, not even get close to it because they had this. And so the fact that your community and that you were, a part of that is so amazing. It's so amazing to me. I mean, I love that so
But
much.
really, it was, they were helping me more than I was helping
Right.
them. Like, believe it or not, right? And I tell people all the time, like, it stems from like the reason why I picked youth sports was because, like I said, when I came back from overseas, there were dark times.
Right.
And having my own child, I got to refocus, right? Like my son being interested in the sport that I love. Like I was like, oh my goodness, like I found a whole new meaning of not only being a father, but now I'm like, oh man, like I could teach him everything that I know.
Right.
And I mean, needless to say, he's 10 times better than his dad. Like, I,
But well, but
and
he has you behind him, but he also has the, the means and to do it
yeah.
in at the level that you can provide, which is just beautiful. I mean, it's so beautiful. I mean, the whole thing. And you're right. When you said that, I was like, oh my God, it helped you not be in such dark times too, which is
Oh, it was,
huge, which is amazing.
people think that I love the kids, but they have helped me beyond words. And I can't tell people, and this is the biggest part about why go after something that you're super passionate about,
Hmm.
right? Because your passion in turn can take you out of any dark place that you're in,
Right.
right? Like, doesn't matter. You could have $2 to your name and getting ready to be evicted, you name it, and you name something that you are super passionate about, you're gonna find the time. You're gonna find the funds. You're gonna find some way to make it work. And I think that's what really, like, people ask me all the time, who's your competition? And I go, me.
Right.
I don't have any competition because I'm not trying to compete with someone.
Right.
My job and what my goals are is not to compete to be the best. My job and goal is to compete to send a kid off to college ready, right?
Yeah.
To
No, I
go
love that.
explore, do their dreams, and then come back and then pay it forward to another kid,
Hmm.
right? Because when I'm old and I always tell them, when I'm old and in a wheelchair, I'm expecting you guys to run this space for me. Like that's the whole point, right? Like
Hmm.
regardless of what we do, our job is to serve others. Like we're here to serve others. And if you're not here to serve others and serve yourself, that'll work for a limited amount of time. But ultimately, um, I know my job and my life serving others gets me so much happiness.
Which is just amazing. And you could hear it. I mean, you could hear, and I love this story so much on so many different levels, because what you created was, I mean, it really, and this is what we talk about all the time on this podcast. It was really meant, I mean, it was your path. All of your life really led you to this moment. And the fact, as I said, like the explosion that happened all together is just so cool to hear about. So I know we went way over time, but that's okay, because I knew,
Oh, sorry about
no,
that.
God, no. You know what? I knew that this was going to be longer than the typical episode, because I knew that I wanted to go through the beginning part, because I know how much the beginning part really ties everything so much together. So, no, I could talk to you for another like hour and a half. But then I think that we could do it another, and I think we talked about doing another live show, which would be really fun, where you can just kind of also mentor people on how, okay, how do you start this? How do you do things? I think that
Oh,
would be
absolutely.
really fun. But I would love for you to talk about, really quickly, like, what do you have up and coming? Like, can people out of state come to, rise to the, to the top VT? Is it Vermont? Is it just people in Vermont, or do you have camps in the summer? Do you have camps in the winter? Take us through that, because I know that there's people
Yeah,
that are
so
interested in that.
there are tons of things that we have upcoming. So this summer we are partnering with UVM to try to get their overnight stay so that they can stay on campus of University of Vermont and then in turn come to our gym to do, so an overnight camp that specializes, and it's just going to be small, right? Like it's not going to be a camp with like 100 kids running around. It's more so going to be more uniquely geared towards training and getting you prepared for that next level. And ultimately after that, we of course we have tons of camps, clinics, and things going on. Unfortunately, in the summer, our schedule is kind of crazy just because our son plays for an Adidas travel team
Right.
as well. So, and then our daughter is is she is doing everything
I love it.
under the sun. She did field hockey this
I know
year,
that that's
and
one of the things we
it,
connected on, because I played in college. And so I was really excited when we were talking about that. She was like, wait, you know the positions? And I was like, oh, I do.
oh, she came. I went to her first game, um, and she scored two goals. I show up and she scores two goals, and I'm just like, what? Like she's never played before.
Right.
I'm like, it's just it's a scary thing when you see a lot of your kids in yourself,
Hmm.
where they can just they're just blessed with their athletic ability. But I mean, yeah, we have a bunch of things that are coming up, but more so, we're going to do more of that overnight stuff so that people can come up to Vermont, experience, the Green Mountains of Vermont, get away from city life if they want to,
Hmm.
and send their kids up here, and then their kids can stay on campus and eat and do everything else, and then we bring them over to our gym to basically get to work
Oh, that's
where
awesome.
it's like a 1 week, 2 week, depending on how long they wanted to come up.
Now, and so they can find that at risetothetopvt.com, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So, and we'll have this all again.
Or they can just create like if you create a login and username on our site, we send out newsletters
Oh, great.
for with all of the information and the links to get to our. And then I'm also in New York City a lot now because of uh, 11
Yep.
Hoops that I'm an investor with. So we're going to be running a lot of camps and clinics, bringing things back to where I grew up and in the inner city. We just had an event at the Gauchos
I
the
saw that.
preview. And so for me, it's just awesome that now I get to give back to the community that I came from, in a sense. So it just ties me right back to where it all started.
Which is so special. I mean, it's so special. Now, is your mom still around?
Yeah, she's in New York City, in Soho. Not the Bronx anymore. She's like I said, she has done really well for herself, and now like has no needs or wants. They're living their she's living her best life. Um,
And then she's got
we
to see these grandkids and what you created,
oh man,
which is so special.
she doesn't care more. I mean, she cares about me, but her grandbabies are where it's at. That's who she really focuses her time. And yeah, no, it's and the other one thing I want to tell people about your passion, like the biggest thing, and I can say is my wife is like she has been the person who I can bounce things off of, and she's just like, do it,
Yeah.
go do it. Like, and it was you don't always find that,
Mm-mm.
right? Like you don't always find like, oh, well, like you can't see it now. The shooting machine that I spent thousands of dollars on and used our savings money to basically buy, you so I mean, when she quit her job to basically start working for the company, she is I try to explain to parents that she's the one who keeps me like guided. Like
Right.
if it wasn't for her, I would be a hot mess,
Well,
So
but that's what we all need, that person. We have the people that come up with the big, the big ideas. I feel like you and I are very similar in those big ideas. And I know my husband is always so supportive of me, but he also will rein me back in. Like, just let's focus on this. Let's get this done.
yeah.
And I'm like, okay, you're
Like I have all these other things that I want to get done and I want to do, like, be like you, like with a podcast and do all these other things. And she's like, oh, okay, but let's slow down. Let's try to, because like you said, when you're passionate about something and I mean, I can attest to it, but we get our sights focused on something and
yeah.
it's very difficult to get us to move to another thing. It's like, no, 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 no. I want this.
Right.
I want to do it this way. So
No, I love that. I love that. And as I said, I love this conversation, and we will have Jason back for the live show on Fireside, which I want to talk to you about, because I know that you had the idea for the podcast, and I kind of have an idea for you. So you guys, you know what to do. Like, rate, review. And you might have listened to this episode and said, oh, this is so cool, but you don't know who needs to hear this. You don't know who has had a similar path or is in a time in their life where they need some inspiration. They need something to be excited about. And this episode, I mean, there was so many connections, and it's all about the story. It's Jason's story that connected you more to his story, but also to something in your life. So please rate, review, and share this episode with as many people as you know. And we will see you again with your next stop. Thank you again, Jason, so much.
no, thank you, Juliet.
Okay, so I'm going to